This is Warbird Radio.
On this episode of Warbird Radio, we're talking to Cory Miller. This guy, he has a degree in mechanical engineering. He is an engine superstar, and he has founded a company that you may or may not have heard of, Stix Aero, back in 2017, where he takes his real prowess in powertrain engineering and applies that with modern practices to our beloved Warbirds. Joining us now from the corporate headquarters of Stix Aero, which may or may not be a hangar somewhere in Minnesota, Cory Miller. Welcome to the show. Glad you could be here.
Thanks for having me.
Is it more than just a hangar that you're working in, Cory? Because right now, you've been in this business a while. I imagine this just, guy swinging hard for the fences right now with some really cool technology. But I talked to you yesterday. You were out pressure washes, cylinders, getting them ready. You're still very much hands-on in this business, which I think is great. Is that kind of a fair assessment of what's going on up there?
Absolutely. When you start small, you have to do all the accounting, and I get some help with that side of the business from my wife. But we spend most of our time building engines and doing everything involved with that, plus, the engineering side and crunching numbers and a little bit of everything. Yep.
Yeah. Way up there in Minnesota, where your shop is located. You have such a cool background, though, a mechanical engineering degree, University of Minnesota. You went on to study at another college up there as well, but 16 years of powertrain engineering experience, and 7 of those were with Harley-Davidson, which is pretty cool. I mean, talk about an old brand. Harley predates a lot of Warbirds. What did you learn in that time?
Yeah, it's kind of cool how much in the engine world there are tons of similarities between, an air-cooled, large bore piston Harley engine and their heritage, going back to 1903, and you think about the history of flight and, from a engine history standpoint, you can't separate automotive or motorsport, motorcycle, or airplane engine history. So that's a lot of what we do is, the getting into the drawings and the, whether it's the old Allison drawings, the Merlin drawings, or just old reference materials, from powertrain engineers of that era. So we keep all that history close by, and I definitely draw on my, experience from that Harley time period. There's something to be said for working in a large company with all the resources, dozens of dyno cells and big teams of engineering and purchasing. And, so we say anybody that's come from like the large OEM background knows how things are done efficiently. They also know of some inefficiencies of big companies. And so that's part of the perspective that Stix Aero has in the approach to helping Warbird engines become more reliable, efficient, and keep them going, is do some things, like a big OEM when it comes to understanding best design practices and systems that make everything efficient and reliable, repeatedly reliable. But we're small, so you do have to be nimble and wear many hats and be clever in how you choose your battles.
Got to be scrappy. I'm reminded of another scrappy guy when you bring up this story, and one of the most incredible stories from an aerospace mechanic and engineer, and I say aerospace because he went on to do some really amazing things. He was a mechanic for Pappy Boyington, and he's out there on the island, and they had really just obliterated their Corsairs, and they had an old parts bird back there. They had another damaged airplane. They had a big operation coming up the next day. And so what did they do? They took the old parts bird and they mated it with the now damaged airplane, and they got the two together. And literally in the span of, I believe, if I've got the story correct, you have to go back and replay it on Warbird Radio, but they put these two airplanes together, they engineered a fix for it, and they got it going. And you know who that guy was? His name is Grover Sassaman, and he is the oldest Harley-Davidson dealer in the United States. He actually signed with Davidson. So you talk about the link between Harley and Warbirds. I mean, it goes back all the way to the war, which is just incredible when you start thinking about guys like Grover Sassman, who really cut their teeth and their mechanic chops working on those engines. And he was a racer back then, too, so doing the high-performance stuff. And that's where your expertise comes in as a mechanical engineer and someone with this type of experience in making these things not only safer but more reliable and still able to operate as we face challenges with fuel and everything else that's going on. How does the technology play into this old world technology today, and how are you blending these two?
Yeah, so many examples I could give. If you follow our Facebook page, a lot of people have commented how it's just something else to see, a large 44-inch long crankcase on a CMM and, the big ruby-tipped granite table, and the probes go around beep, beep, beeping. That's just one example of, when I started, I asked, how do you guys tell that these journals are straight? And nobody was taking that approach. So we've been doing this for over 7 years, just at first we brought the crankcases to a local CMM place and some were in of spec and some are out of spec. And if they're out of spec, it's one of those things that it could run, you put it together, it meets the Allison specification of the crankshaft turning with 50 foot-pounds or less, very crude. If you're out in the field, that's one way to tell that, it's probably good enough to run for a while, but, why not put it back to original? It's not that much extra cost and effort when you really add it up as part of the whole engine package and what overhauls cost. And so,
yeah, we're kind of at that point, aren't we?
Process.
I mean, we're at that point where these things are no longer plentiful. You're not buying them off of boat owners that have run them in their race boat anymore. I mean, these things are becoming exceedingly rare. And so when you take that old world mindset and you have it, let me just say right now, Cory is the kind of guy who understands that World War II era brain of engineer, because you've gone back through all of the engineering drawings. Talk to us just a little bit about that, because you have the new, but you also have the old because of your years of investing in learning the old world ways by uncovering all of these drawings. You sort of touched on it, but if I'm correct, you actually went back to the Rolls-Royce Foundation and pulled a lot of this information and other sources where you could find it. Did you not?
Yeah. One of our partners and big help in this whole process has been Air Corps Aviation out of Bemidji, and they have Air Corps Library, which most people know well now. And Esther being the main person there. So scanning just, so many rolls of microfilm, thousands and thousands of drawings that it took a lot of cooperation with the Rolls-Royce Heritage Trust to get access to those. And then many, many hours, usually in the evenings while watching TV, just clicking through these massive drawing files and most of them experimental or of buildings, interesting but not useful. But eventually we did find about 80 to 90% of all the production Allison engine drawings, and I believe they're the only ones out there. So that's the Merlin drawing sets are available, have been forever. But it's been a big challenge with the Allison not having the production drawings till the last couple of years since we've found them, and be able to go back and review some of our work and our assumptions on what numbers should be, kind of extrapolating what the overhaul manuals list as the limits and stuff like that. So been very helpful.
Yeah, and there comes a point where you see enough of that stuff that you start to really understand the mindset of the engineer back then, and you start to see similarities. And one of the things that I always find interesting about reading these old manuals is they don't necessarily list things that they've listed before, right? So, of course, the valve tolerance is this, or of course the tolerance is this, because that's what it always is, and that's how we design these things. And they assume, in a lot of instances, that you're not an idiot I hate to, say that just so openly,
Right.
but there's a lot of assumptions that are made in these old world drawings. And so if you don't start going through these voraciously, like you have been able to do, and build that sort of institutional memory and educate yourself on that, you're depending then on shop experience and what's been learned in, say, the last 15, 25 years from whoever you're learning it from, because so many of these guys are dead that worked on these things originally and understood the factory training that came from this. And so that institutional memory is gone, but you've been able to relearn that and now really dovetail it into your new world experience where you have all of these incredible tools where tolerances can be closer and where things can be more precise in a way that they've never been possible to do in the past. That has to be exciting.
It is, yeah. And a big part of what we love sharing with everybody, not everybody can afford to own or operate a Warbird, but so many are passionate about, learning and maintaining the history. And there is just so many cool little stories that we have to tell that we're excited to finally, start getting out there on the manufacturing history of these things. And Allison was unique in, developing the 1710 engine in, through the 30s over the course of many years. And then there's kind of a lag until they really got contracts. And then when they went into mass production, they produced way more engines, way more quickly than anybody else. So it was really a, feat in mass production. And because they had designed it for manufacturing, using kind of the Henry Ford assembly line and tolerance stack ups, they could manufacture and build engines way faster than their competitors and the British engines. So cool part of the history that we definitely want to keep alive. That's one of our main goals, is to see more Allison engines out there flying. There's way more Mullins and Allisons flying. And we intend to change that. There's a few things that we have found in the Allison that, you can still build it within the specification numbers and just a couple tweaks. And the engine responds very well and just, is much more reliable and durable. And, along with that comes performance for race applications if that's what you desire to use the engine for. So, excited to share
Good
that
stuff
with whoever's interested.
Well, the other thing I love about you is you have this reverence about you, not only for the other colleagues that you have in this industry and the other shops that are out there, but you really have a reverence for this industry. You've chosen an engine that over the years, some might say has been neglected. It's sort of, there's just few and far between when it comes to shops with the expertise that you have to work on the Allison. Now, you're not opposed to growing your business and to expanding your business into working on other engines. I've already asked you straight up about the Gypsy Major for our beloved Tiger Mods and Chipmunks that really there are very few people supporting. Maybe one if you stretch it here in the United States. So there is room in these vintage military aircraft, the Warbird movement, if you will, for safe, reliable, modern skill sets that come into this, because the modern part of this is a huge part. One thing that impressed me about you is your appreciation for a truly authentic restoration. You mentioned Air Corps. There's nobody doing the work that they're doing up there at that level consistently with the use of old and new, that modern that we've been talking about. And you have an engine monitoring system that is truly state-of-the-art that does not offend the historic preservation of the aircraft. Talk to us about this, because this is really cool.
Yeah, the engine monitor is something that we had planned on doing, early on in this project. 6 years ago, we built a couple of working desktop prototypes that the main functionality is, you don't need a display. Most Warbird operators don't want any digital display for good reason, but the data is just logged and stored. And then wirelessly transmitted over cell network and or satellite back to the people that can process that data, whether it's your crew chief, whether it's us. So we've had that developed, and it took a few years for the commercial offerings to catch up to the point where they're cost effective and reliable. And only recently has that become available. And so we've partnered with a couple of the right businesses to work together to deliver that. But it's our idea, and we have some custom IP to, it's not something that's available without our system that's put it all together. So feel free to look us up and ask more about it. We'll be coming out with more official offerings and for the engine monitor side of the business. But statistically, I've been to the engine propeller directorate, and you listen to, aircraft statistics on engine failures and so forth. And early detection is 100% the primary, the first thing that you should go after to statistically increase your, reduce your risk and increase the odds that you catch something before it develops into something that pilots having a hard time dealing with.
You're right. And we've had Doug Rosendahl on, and it's Safety Month, and I asked him point blank about this in our first Safety Month discussion of 2024. I said, it seems like we're doing a pretty good job when it comes to mitigating some of these engine failure type incidents because of things just like what you're talking about. Pilots are training, obviously, for those instances. But Doug pointed out, and I think this is so great, he said, a lot of times, even though it's an 80-year-old airplane, these are the best squawk-free airplanes, the most lovingly restored airplanes, and that equates oftentimes to the safest airplanes you'll ever get in, are some of these 80-year-old Warbirds. And it's because of guys like you and companies like Stix Aero that are putting the efforts into early detection. So if you're the Bernie and you're up flying, and you're also the crew chief and the lead mechanic, you get a text message, I guess, with all of this engine data. And if there's something that's an anomaly or high, I'm guessing there's a limit that's set where it sends you an instant notification. Hey, something's going on here. That's really cool.
Yeah, and we can customize the limits so it's not sending erroneous messages. That's a key. But I think just knowing that most of the time there's a problem developing, during taxi run up or takeoff, and that's the point to watch it. And if there's anything odd going on, you can quantify it and make the best decision, at that critical point in flight. So, if you're in the middle of nowhere, there's very few places that don't have a cell signal that, you can land and call and say, hey, check the data. Something wasn't running right. And, then you can just make so much more informed decisions, and just, the basic engine parameters, give you a lot of clues as to what's going on. Not a very novel idea, but, we really hope that more operators do call us up and want to adopt it, because I think
it's a modern take, right? It's a modern take on a very well-known thing. We're having an engine monitoring system, but the cool thing about this again is that it does not detract from a Concorde level restoration. It's really, really cool to see this and how it just sends it to you. And it doesn't even, when you look at it inside the cowling, or you have the cowling open for judging or something like that, it's very discreet. So all of this has the ultimate restoration collector in mind. And I just think this is, I think it's really, really cool stuff. There's some new stuff afoot. I'll let you get into that here in just a second. But I want to ask you a little bit more about you, because this is quickly becoming a family business, Cory. Your wife is down there helping you, and she has just a phenomenal background herself. But it's also, there's a guy by the name of Paul Davis who works down there. Tell us about Paul. He's kind of your lead guy down there, engine overhaul and testing guy. Talk to us about Paul. Who's Paul?
Yeah, Paul is an awesome member to the team. He's our first real lead mechanic, and he has a testing background too. I actually found him while he was still working for Rolls-Royce in Derby, running large engine test cells. So, it's hard to find a mix of people that are real expert mechanics, but also, have the technical skills, of testing and sensors and wiring and computer skills to, throw together a spreadsheet. He can whip up a mean spreadsheet of just hundreds of rows of data that if you look at a Paul's spreadsheet that quantifies the crankcase, the crankshaft, the main bearings, and that whole stack up of numbers to know that, when we pick parts off the shelf and put it together, it's, right to nominal tolerance and stuff like that, that organizing the information. Paul does it all. He is just such a perfect fit for us. And we've got a line of other good people that are in the wings ready to come on board very shortly here as we ramp up.
Well, I'll tell you, here's what I love about Paul. A Marine, got his start growing up on a ranch there, flies RC airplanes, learned how to fix those engines, those little tiny 36,000 RPM running car engines and airplane engines. I mean, this is a guy that just gets it. And both of you, and your wife included, so the three of you, all live on respective farms and hobby farms, which means you have this propensity to fix anything with anything you have. You yourself grew up on a dairy farm, so you just have that engineering mind, and it's all encompassing for the folks at Stix Aero. They live it, they breathe it, they work with it, and then they go home and they do this in their spare time. In the last few minutes, Cory, tell us about the new stuff going on, because there is an exciting announcement coming to Stix Aero.
Yeah, so, launching the engine overhaul side of the business, customers always want to know how long till you can get an engine. And the bottleneck often is the carburetor overhaul side. Most people are aware of Precision being purchased and Martin leaving vintage carburetor and many others. It's just like the whole industry is going through growing pains right now, and carburetors.
And nobody wants to hear that, right? Like, nobody wants to hear that. Nobody wants to hear that the carburetor shop in itself has an issue, because if there's two things, it's the fuel pump and the carburetor that you want to make certain are performing correctly.
Exactly. And, we called every shop, and the lead times were, unclear and concerning. And, a couple guys at NWAC, were really asking this question as well. And we didn't have the announcement at the time, but making it right now for the first time officially, we'll send out something more official. But we are purchasing KPS Aeromotive from Santa Clarita, California. Kevin and Jason Peterson have an awesome business out there. Pete Law is, the one that Kevin worked with for decades. So we've been out there and trained with them, and Kevin's just kind of retiring from it, and they haven't ever done it really full time. So they are a very capable shop, but didn't ever do a lot of the large carburetors. Certainly some, and very, very capable. So they do the small ones too. They do the Hollies. They do, if you look at their capabilities list online, that website will forward to us in the very near future. And we're moving it here to our headquarters in New Richmond, Wisconsin. And just another resource that will be doing carburetors for anybody and everybody, just to help keep everybody going and minimizing delays.
So does that mean you're now looking late at night at clean rooms and suppressed air systems and all this kind of pressure systems, so you can keep this place exceedingly clean where you're working? Because that's part of it, right? I mean, the facility in a carb shop oftentimes, at least you hope, has come into consideration. And knowing you as an engineer and the folks that you work with, this is going to be one of the best, if not the best, in the industry very, very soon. I'm excited for you, Cory. I really am.
Yeah, that's one piece we're excited about too. Is it pairs so well with our dyno test stands where they're highly instrumented. We measure more things that I don't think anybody else is measuring to fully quantify the entire engine using modern engine computing software that, calculates parameters in real time that the Allison engineers would have could only dream of, and would, if they could come back, they would just love to see what we're able to do now. And they would expect us to, if you're not doing it, they'd say, why aren't you? That's stuff's at your fingertips. In the engine world, it used to cost $1 million to instrument a dyno cell. And in the last 15 years, that price has dropped, in half or by even more. So, it's just an example of what we're doing. But the carburetor business is the same. You measure it on a flow bench and you can quantify this thing in every possible way, following the Bendix manuals and so forth. But, one extra step is to put it on the dyno and then further verify, what exactly the output of that carburetor on the engine is. So
I love it. You always see the crusty mechanic, right, in these old war movies, out there with his sleeves rolled up, or maybe even not even a shirt, and he's greasy and he's out there working, and he sort of, slaps the rear end of the airplane and says it's good to go, bring my airplane back. But in reality, if you've ever been around any of these World War II mechanics, my grandfather was one who worked on Corsairs and Tiger Cats and stuff. I've never met someone so exacting and so exactly the opposite of how they're often portrayed in movies and culturally. These folks were engineers in their own right, and just methodical in the way that they went through a lot of this stuff. I mean, sure, there was some, just get it done in the field, but at the test side and at where it counts, these folks were really, really conscientious scientists in their own right, engineer types. And I'm just so thrilled that you have taken on, again, this reverence of this profession and really, really brought it to another level. So, Cory Miller, my hat's off to you and everyone up there at Stix Aero. Great stuff.
Yeah, thanks. And one last thing, Matt, what got us into the carburetor stuff was we were already doing the speed density unit stuff, because we have to put give our appreciation for Pat Harker and the PA2 project. That was the impetus of all this, and doing the G6 engines that require that SD400 speed density unit, which, is an animal all in its own.
Like an early computer.
We could have a whole other podcast on that. Exactly. It just more precisely delivers the air and the fuel and compensates, for temperatures and altitudes. And it has its own test stand. They're a tricky little bugger to get going. And so, yeah, already doing that, it makes sense to do the carburetors too. But, we're excited to get the G6 engines done for Pat's PD2, which has been in restoration for, I don't know, something more than 20, 25 years, I think. So look for that to come out in a few years.
What a remarkable machine in restoration. It's great to see folks like yourself getting involved in this at another level. And, 6 years is not the new guy on the block either. Feels like it sometimes. But, again, the way you've gotten into this, the way that you have approached it, I think is admirable. And I just look forward to more people finding out about Stix Aero and you, Cory Miller, Paul Davis, and your lovely wife, Rochelle, who's up there helping you guys out. It's all good stuff coming out of Minnesota these days. So, and where you're working right now. Give everybody your address now, Cory. Tell them how to find you.
Yep, we're at the New Richmond, Wisconsin Airport, KRNH. We've got a couple different hangars on the airport, and we're building a new one this summer. They opened up a new section on the east side of the runway, so we're excited to get our permanent location there.
In Wisconsin, right? Which is, I keep saying Minnesota because so much of your background was in Minnesota, but your location is in Wisconsin.
It is.
Not that it matters, because folks if they're up there, they're going to be able to find you. But again, in Wisconsin there, where you're working now. And give them your website.
Yeah.
Quick. Tell them your website.
Stixaero.com. Yep, STRIXAERO.com. And you can email us from there, and there'll be pending changes to that website with the engine monitor and the carb shop and so forth.
I think it's great. And pretty soon, maybe you'll be able to just go online and click buy now on a brand new Allison or engine of your choice, and there won't be a wait time. How cool would that be, Cory?
We're working towards that. Yes, sir.
I think it's so exciting. Great stuff. Cory Miller from Stix Aero. Again, it's StrixAero.com. Thanks for coming on the show today. Great having you. And I hope you come back. We got to do that on the Allison and the Voodoo box that you're working on. That would be a great show. I don't know if anybody would understand it. I know I wouldn't, so I'll just say here he is and you can talk about it. How about that? That'd be fun. A masterclass.
Sounds great.
Thanks again. Cory Miller, everyone, from StrixAero.com. You got to go check it out there. He is the president and the powertrain engineer at StrixAero.com, doing great work. Listen, if you've not already liked, followed, or subscribed to Warbird Radio, please do so. If you want to subscribe to our newsletter, you'll never miss an episode because as soon as a new one comes out, I'll email you personally with a link to listen to it. And, of course, our Facebook page, we don't even have an Instagram page. It's just right there at Warbird Radio. Thanks again for being here. So long for now.
Supporting peace the old-fashioned way. This is Warbird Radio. Tune in. Take off.